Going to go ahead and get started. Hi, my name is Daniel Barkowitz, and let me be the first to welcome you to our event tonight. This is our family FAFSA training event. And as I said, my name is Daniel Barkowitz. I am the Assistant Vice President of Financial Assistance and Student Employment at the University of Miami here in Miami, Florida. And it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this event. Just to be clear, this is not a University of Miami event. This is actually an event that's sponsored by the Broward Educational Foundation with support from ECMC through the Department of Education funds, really designed to help support and reach out to families who have not yet completed a FAFSA for the coming year. So we're thrilled that you're here. This is being recorded tonight. So I want to welcome both the people who are with us in person, and if you're watching this recording, I want to welcome you as well. Our hope tonight is to really help prepare you to be able to do the FAFSA without challenge. We know it's been a challenging year, and really to help you realize the dreams of your college education. And I would love to start actually by inviting those of you who are with us tonight, if you could in the chat, if you could just type in where you're dialing in from. I guess dialing in is probably not a valid word in this virtual world, where you are connecting in from, what state, what city, where you are tonight, where life finds you. So if in the chat, if you would just type in where you are connecting from, that would be great. We'd love to welcome you. And again, so happy to have people from literally all over the country with us this evening. In addition to myself, we are joined by a group of folks behind the scenes who are here to answer your questions. So as we go through this evening, if you do have questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A. We have a group that is going to monitor the Q&A for you. They will answer your questions as you go through. And if there are pieces that you need some assistance on, we are here for you. We want to help connect you and help you get your FAFSA done. We also have a couple of offers for you tonight and benefits to you. Again, being supported by our federal colleagues, we have some funds that have been dedicated specially for this purpose. One of them is that if you have not yet done a FAFSA and after tonight complete your own FAFSA, you will be receiving, once you document that, and I'll go through tonight how to do that, you'll be receiving a $20 Amazon gift certificate to spend as you would like on any option you would like. So that will be delivered to you. And also tonight, I'm excited to offer that if you can get 10 friends who haven't yet done a FAFSA to do a FAFSA, we've got a special offer for you too, which is actually for every 10 friends that you can convince to do a FAFSA, a $500 stipend. And we'll talk about that. I'll share with you how that will work later on this evening as well. Again, all of this is being sponsored by the federal government through ECMC. And really, the reason for this is we're going to talk through that we really need to stimulate and support FAFSA completion for this year. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. What I want to do is share a little bit with you about what the FAFSA is and why it's so important. I'm going to share first, this is my email address, dbarkowitz@gmail.com. So if you have questions after tonight, and I'll give you some other ways to reach out to us as well, but if you have questions after tonight and need additional support, you are free to email me at that email address. If you would like to take notes as we go through or screenshots, feel free, but don't feel like you have to. I'm going to point out to you where you can download a copy of the slides I'm going to share with you this evening. And also, we will be sending you a copy of this recording. So no need to take too many notes if you don't want to. But if you're the kind of person who likes to take notes as you go, feel free. I will also, in advance, apologize for my voice. I am a little congested. I am suffering from a bit of summer, shall we will, cold, or actually it's COVID. But the good news is it's COVID remotely, so you can't catch it from me. But I am in my bedroom, locked away. And as a result, you'll hear some sneezing and coughing as we go through. I'm fine. It's a very mild case. But just wanted to share with you that if you hear some coughing from me, that is what's going on. So don't worry, I'll take a drink of water and we'll keep on going. Okay, so with that, let us log in or launch into what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to talk about first why FAFSA completion matters, what the FAFSA is, why it matters, I'll share a little bit about it. Some of you may have lived through the FAFSA mess we've had this year and why it isn't too late to make a difference, why it's important for you to actually be part of this now. And so, what I want to start with is talking about what is the FAFSA. So, as a reminder, the FAFSA, or Free Application for Federal Student Aid, is the federal government's application form for federal financial aid. It also is the application form for most state and institutional financial aid for most institutions around the country. And the reason this is important is because when you do the FAFSA, you actually apply for more than just loans. I think many students assume that the FAFSA only gets them access to student loans, and that's certainly been what's been out in the public media. But I would show you, and these data I'm sharing with you tonight have some information that I want to walk through. First of all, I want to share with you if you're a senior in high school or have now graduated from high school, seniors in high school who complete a FAFSA are 84% more likely to immediately enroll in college. And what we do know is that those who immediately enroll in college are more likely to finish college than those who set college off for the future. So, really important, FAFSA is the conduit to get into college and to actually get funding for college. The other thing to know is that in 21-22, which is the last year we have finished statistics for, there was over $177 billion given out in undergraduate financial aid that year. And as you can tell, the vast majority of that, almost 60%, or actually about 60%, was given out in the form of grants and scholarships. As I said, often people assume that all the money available for financial aid is in loans, but that's not true. And in fact, if you look at the pie chart, the single biggest source of funding is actually institutional grants at 30%. That is colleges and universities giving money themselves to help their students attend their institutions. 60% in total in grants and scholarships, about a third in loans, and the rest in tax benefits and work awards. What we do know is that in a typical year, in most years, you would have started, if you're a senior, your FAFSA in October. And you would have done your FAFSA and you would have done the CSS profile if you were applying to a school that needed that application, or maybe some other applications as well. And you would have been given an aid offer around the time you got your admissions offer. Well, this year was anything but typical. What we know is that this year has been really a fiasco. It's been, if you will, the FAFSA fiasco of 2024. There has been a complete rewrite of the federal financial aid system. And as a result, the whole system had to be rebooted and rewritten. And originally, this was going to be targeted for the 23-24 academic year. But it took Congress, or it took actually the Department of Education so long to do this rewrite, they asked Congress for permission to delay it a year. And so now it is impacted the 24-25 application year. And if you're applying for college this year, you may be impacted by this. And maybe you've waited to get your FAFSA done because of all of what's been going on. I'm not going to go through all of this, but just to highlight, there have been a number of issues that have happened this year with the FAFSA. As I said, typically it would launch October 1st. This year, it didn't really even launch until December 30th. Data wasn't shared with colleges until late. There were problems with information. There were problems for families where students were US citizens or eligible non-citizens, but their parents weren't. And there have been just a number of bad situations this year. But the good news is that it's not too late. I'm going to skip over those. Those are just showing you some impact nationwide that FAFSA completions are down. What do we do about it? So, A, it is not too late to apply for fall financial aid. So, if you haven't yet applied and you want to go to college in the fall, it is not too late to apply. That's the first piece of good news. The second piece of good news is it isn't too late to apply for fall admission either. If you haven't yet applied for admission to school, you're thinking about it, but this whole FAFSA thing has thrown you for a loop and you haven't really sat down to do it, you can still apply for admission. Many of our nation's great community colleges, in the state of Florida, we have some terrific state colleges. Those colleges are still taking applications for admission, and many of them guarantee admission. So you are, as long as you've graduated high school, you are admissible. and you can get financial aid to begin your education this fall. It is not too late, but now is the time. If perchance you've given up on the fall semester and you've thought, you know what, I'm just going to wait till spring, things are too complicated. It's not too late to apply for spring admission. Many colleges have spring admission programs as well. Although, again, we highly recommend you go ahead and apply for fall still, even now. Or maybe you went ahead and registered and enrolled, but you haven't yet completed your application for a financial aid. It's not too late to complete the FAFSA and to get that application done. So, what we're going to do tonight is I want to actually walk through with you the FAFSA itself. We're going to do a bit of a preview of the form. We're going to go basically question by question through the form to highlight for you some of the pitfalls and mistakes that families make. And we're going to make sure to go through this so you're prepared. And I want to say, as we get started, this slide deck, which is available for you online, has 300 and something slides in it. We are not going to go through all 300 slides tonight. But if you want the complete version of the PowerPoint, it is available online. I will show you how to get it. We're going to go through what most of you will go through, which is the application process for a dependent student with parents. So I'm going to talk through that process. I'll also highlight some differences where maybe you might be independent or you might be a dependent student who's not in touch with their parents. We'll talk about all of that as we go through tonight. And again, I'll encourage you to ask any questions you have in the Q&A if you have questions as we go through. But we'll talk through the application process. How do you apply? What questions do you fill out? How do you answer them? And I'm going to give you screenshots of what this is going to look like for you. And again, as a reminder, we are recording this. So if you want to go back later and look at this again, you should feel free to do so. So first of all, I just want to be clear, these are copies of sample screens. So it might be a little different than what you see based on how you answer, but it is available. It's very close. These were updated in May and June to what you're seeing now on the actual application. The most important thing to know is that before you complete your FAFSA, you need to complete an FSA ID. FSA is Federal Student Aid, so a Federal Student Aid ID. That ID is a combination of a username and a password, and that username and password is required to access your FAFSA. And when you file for an FSA ID, you're going to provide your social security number, your date of birth, and your name and other information. That will then confirm your identity to prove that you are who you say you are so you can access your records with the IRS. It's really important that you file for your FSA ID at least 2 to 3 days before you start your FAFSA form. You don't want to do it all at the same time. So you want to go and get your FSA ID first, wait until you get an email saying it's been confirmed, and then log in and complete your FAFSA form. Every student will need an FSA ID, and at least one parent, and we'll talk about why it might be two a little later, but at least one parent will need an FSA ID as well to be able to sign the form. So that FSA ID, as I said, is a combination of a username and a password. So again, we'll talk about how this plays out when you sign in. But the FAFSA itself is what's considered a roles-based form. What that means is when you log into the FAFSA, you'll be presented with a question asking if you're a student or a parent. And based on what you select, you'll get questions really addressed to you based on how you answer that question. The other piece that's important to know is a new term of art this year called a contributor. So often we think of contributor as someone who gives money. That's not really what this means in this context. Contributor for FAFSA means someone who gives information. So every FAFSA will have at least one contributor, that is the student. If a student is married, the student's spouse might be a second contributor. But chances are most students who are at least dependent students going from high school into college aren't going to be married. So they have a parent. Their parent is going to be one contributor. And that parent's spouse, depending upon their tax filing status, might be another contributor. So it's possible you'll have 2 or 3 contributors to the form. Sorry. Notice though. Grandparent is never a contributor, aunt is never a contributor. This is only about the biological family or the adoptive family. So you're never going to have a situation where a foster parent is a contributor or someone else is a contributor. Contributors have to do two things. They have to provide consent to make sure that the Department of Education can go pull their information from the IRS, and they have to sign their section of the form for this to be complete. So we'll talk about how this works, and I'll show you this as we go through tonight. So generally, the form itself looks a little different, feels a little different, and we'll talk about this, and you'll see this as we go through. And again, you'll have a copy of this PowerPoint if you'd like to go through. So we're going to do or talk through what happens when a student starts, and this is again how I would recommend you do this, and how you would begin the process. So to begin with, when you're navigating to the page, you're going to go to studentaid.gov. So again, studentaid.gov, and you're going to choose FAFSA form, which is on that top menu bar, FAFSA form. And from there, you will get to this landing page. And you have really two options. You can start a new form or access an existing form if you've already done a form for this year. But again, probably most of you have not. So we're going to click on Start a New Form. Also notice, by the way, there is a link here to complete a 23-24 FAFSA form. That's the one for this current academic year that is ending. If it's summer, it's ending relatively soon. Most of you who are looking for fall are really focused on fall enrollment. That's a 24-25 FAFSA form. But if you happen to be enrolled this summer, and your school uses summer as a trailer, meaning it comes at the end of the academic year, it would be the 23-24 FAFSA form that is needed to complete. Just a warning, the 23-24 FAFSA form closes on June 30th, 2024. So if you or your friends are attending college this summer and you have not yet completed your 23-24 FAFSA, you have just a couple of days to get that done before that year's FAFSA form closes. The 24-25 FAFSA form, on the other hand, is open now and will remain open all the way through June 30th, 2025. So you have a long time to do it. I'm not suggesting you wait. You should go ahead and do it now, but it is open and there is not a deadline per se. There's a deadline for the state of Florida to qualify for state of Florida funds. So you want to make sure that you meet those deadlines, but there is no deadline per se to get the application completed. Okay, so once you start a new FAFSA, you'll be asked to log in with your FSA ID. And again, we're going to log in as the student here. So we will put in our FSA ID and our password. And again, you will have created this 3 days earlier. And when you log in, you can do it there. If you're not, and you click on create an account, that will give you the walkthrough in terms of creating your FSA ID. Once you go to the next page and log in, you're then asked, who are you? Are you a student? Or are you a parent? In this case, we're creating this as a student. So our student is going to say, I am a student. And our student name, by the way, is Raya Tran. So Raya is the student in our case. What's next going to happen is you're going to see 4 video screens. These videos just give you some basic information about the FAFSA. And what I'm going to show you, a lot of what I'm going to show you repeats between the student page and then it happens again on the parent page. So on the student page, which is where we're at, we're going to have these 4 videos. It tells you why you're using the FAFSA form. It talks about what is a contributor. We've talked about that already. On this screen, it also tells you what information or documents you might need. Number 3, it tells you what to expect when you go through the FAFSA form. And number 4, what happens after you submit the FAFSA form. So those videos are instructive and they're worth watching. But again, they'll cover the information we're going to cover as well. Once you page through those videos, it will then ask you to confirm that you are indeed the person that's logged in. And we'll see here the information. If anything is wrong, the student is told they can update their information in their account settings. The next question is the first one that causes students some confusion. And I want to make sure to highlight this one for you. It asks for the student's state of legal residence. So the state usually is not that hard, right? So, I'm living in the state of Florida right now. The question that becomes harder for students is the date they became a legal resident. For students that have never moved, right, that date should be their date of birth. So their month, their year of birth. If the students moved to the state, then it's the date that they moved into the state. What's important here is that you understand in the state of Florida, for example, you have to have lived in Florida for at least 1 year prior to starting college for you to qualify for state financial aid. Different states might have different rules. So you want to find out from the state that you're going to go to or you are living in, what are their rules to qualify for their state financial aid programs. But in Florida, it's a year. And you'll see the same question when it comes to parents. For parents, I just want to, while we're here, for parents, what's important is that you use the earlier of the two dates. So mom and dad may not have moved to the state at the same time. Whoever moved earlier is the date you're going to want to use. The next page is reviewing the consent. And I just, again, want to talk about consent. Consent here is defined as allowing the Department of Education to go pull your federal tax information. We have to have consent from everyone who is a contributor. So the student has to provide consent for the Department of Education to go and look at the IRS information and pull their IRS information. Even if there's no information, even if a student did not file the tax return, they still have to provide consent because the Department of Education will go to the IRS and say, give me Johnny Smith's tax return. And the Department of Education will say, Johnny Smith didn't file a tax return. That requires consent to pull that information. Consent is required, and it's required of anyone who's a contributor on the form. If consent is refused, then the student is not eligible for financial aid. And you'll see here there's an explanation. The screen goes on. At the bottom, it says agree or approve. If you click decline, then what will happen is at that point, there'll be a pop-up screen that says, are you sure this is not really what you want to do? If you do this, you won't be qualified for aid. And you have to click through that if you want to decline. But otherwise, in most cases, students and parents will hit approve. So the next question begins the first section of the form, and that is student personal circumstances. What you're going to see is when each section begins, you'll get a note like this that signposts for you where you are in the application. And as you'll see, there'll be breadcrumbs throughout that will say how far along in the application you are. So there are 5 sections to this application. Now, I want to remind you that everything we've done so far is the same if I am a 17-year-old applying for college, or I'm a 67-year-old applying for college, or I'm a 28-year-old applying for med school, or a 37-year-old applying for my PhD. Everything about the application process is absolutely the same up to this point. So it doesn't matter what your age is, you're going to see all these same questions. This section, this first section, is going to identify if we're dealing with a dependent or an independent student. What do I mean by dependent versus independent? So a dependent student is a student whose information it's required that their parents submit their section of the application. So they are dependent on their parents. And generally, this is based on age. So if you are under the age of 24, you'll be considered dependent. And there'll be a number of other criteria. But just for the moment, you're not married, you're not a graduate student, you're not a veteran, you don't have kids of your own, etc. You're considered dependent. If you are independent, so let's say you're married, or you're remarried, or divorced, or widowed. If you're independent, then in those situations, you don't have to provide your parental information. And I'll highlight that for you as we go through. So Raya, who is our traditionally aged student, is going to answer single here, and it's going to ask her a series of additional questions after that. The next question asks, when she starts the school year in 24-25, what year in college will she be? If we're going into a master's program, she would answer that. But in her case, she is a traditional first-year freshman. If you're a student and you've been in dual enrollment, so you have college credits, you have AP credits or ACE credits, you still want to answer first-year freshman if this is your first year post-high school attending college. The next trick question, a lot of dependent students sometimes get this one wrong. On the bottom of the page, it says, when you start the 24-25 academic year, will you already have your bachelor's degree? Reminder that your high school diploma is not your bachelor's degree. So you want to click no on that question, and don't get caught in the trap of answering yes. If you answer yes, then you've automatically excluded yourself from a number of programs, federal programs. But if you do have your first bachelor's degree, you do have to answer yes there. But again, most of you will not. Your high school diploma is not your bachelor's degree. The next page asks about a number of other personal circumstances. And again, here is where we go through all of these other exceptions. So, are you on active duty? Are you a US veteran? Again, we're talking to the student here. Do you have children of your own? Were you an orphan? Or are you an orphan? Are you a ward of the court? Are you in foster care or were you in foster care? Um, are you in legal guardianship? If any of these are yes, then the student is considered independent and no parental information is needed. If none of these apply, which is Raya's case, she would click none of these apply and move on. So the next page asks about the potential of being homeless or a homeless youth or an at risk of homelessness. And it's important to understand there are two components here. So at any time on or after July 1 of 2023, was the student unaccompanied, meaning they were not with their parents, and either homeless or self supporting and at risk of homelessness? So Raya's going to answer this question no, but if she were to answer yes, the next screen would ask for some information about how that's documented, either by services from a homeless shelter or by a McKinney-Vento specialist, or potentially not documented, and the student needs to meet with a financial aid officer to document that situation. But also important to understand, this is for cases where the student themselves is not with their parents. So this is different from a homeless family, but this is about a student who themselves is unaccompanied. If they answer yes, the student is then considered independent, may have to provide some documentation to the college, but is independent, does not need their parental information. In Raya's case, the answer is no. So all of that said, let's say, so far we've answered all these questions about dependency, but there's still something special going on with this family or unusual, right? In this case, it's unusual. So what would be an unusual circumstance? Let's say a student is a victim of abuse or neglect, or they're estranged from their parents, or they're a victim of human trafficking, or their parents are incarcerated. In one of those situations, the student can say, I have unusual circumstances and submit the form as provisionally independent. In this case, Raya doesn't have any of those circumstances, but if you do, or a student you're working with does, or if you are the student, you can answer yes, and the form will allow you to submit it without parental information, but you'll then have to follow up with the college to document your circumstances. And finally, the last question here under dependency status says, with all the information you've given me, even though you're still dependent, do you want to just apply for a direct and subsidized loan? Meaning, are your parents not willing to provide information, um, but you don't have unusual circumstances that would allow you to be independent? In some cases, there are students whose parents just maybe flat out refuse to submit the FAFSA form. If that's the case, the student can answer yes, but all they will receive is a small, unsubsidized loan. When I've had cases like this before and I talk to the student or the family, often what happens is the student or a parent will tell me, I can't afford it, so therefore I don't want to fill out the form. And my response is, remember, the purpose of the form is just to see whether you can afford it and how much you can afford. It doesn't require a payment. It just is used to determine how much you're eligible for in aid. So filling out the FAFSA never obligates someone to pay for college. All it does is determine whether or not the student is eligible for aid. So often that will be enough to convince a parent to complete the application. The next question asks, tell me a little bit about your parents. And there are a series of three questions. I'm going to go through the three of them to give you the information so you're prepared. But in Raya's case, it's pretty easy. Raya's question asks, are the parents married to each other? In Raya's case, they are. So we're going to request information from both of Raya's legal parent, either biological or adoptive parent. If Raya had answered no, the next question that would be asked is, are your parents unmarried and living together? So the reason that's important is if parents are unmarried and living together, we still need information from both parents. So if that were the case, we'd still want information from both parents. If Ryan answered no to that question, the third question would ask, is there one parent who provides more financial support to you than the other? Let's talk about that for a second. So, what do they mean by financial support? What they're talking about is who actually supports you as a student with more direct expenses, maybe paying for rent, maybe paying for food, maybe paying for shelter or for books or clothes or whatever. Um, and that is who you would determine to be the parent you would fill out the FAFSA with. So, give you an example. Let's say two parents, John and Jill, are married. Um, if John and Jill are married and Raya's the kid, then they would file the form together. Okay, well, let's say John and Jill have divorced, and John, over the last 12 months, provided more financial support to the student. In that situation, John would be the parent to fill out the form, and Jill would not put her information on at all. Now, I didn't ask whether John claims the student or Jill claims the student. That doesn't matter. Who claims you on the tax return doesn't matter. What matters is who provides more financial support. Let's say John and Jill don't provide any financial support to the student, or let's say they provide an equal amount of financial support. Who do you choose then? Well, the form tells you choose the parent who earns more or has more assets, who's better off financially. But that's only if one parent provides more support, or sorry, one parent does not provide more support than the other. So, in a world where John pays more but earns less, John would fill out the form. In a world where neither of them pay and Jill earns more, Jill would fill out the form. So once you select the parent, so let's go back through our analysis. So John and Jill, divorced, Raya's the kid. John is the parent we're choosing because John provides more financial support. John happens to be remarried to Jane. I know, John, Jill, and Jane, I'm sorry, but John is remarried to Jane. So in that situation, Jane is the stepmother. But because we've chosen John as the parent and John is remarried, Jane has to be included as well. So it is that family. Once you've chosen the parent to include, it is that family that gets included on the FAFSA. Now, all of that said, Raya's situation is pretty simple. Her parents are just married to each other. If yours is more complicated, you want to ask a question in the chat, feel free, or the Q&A rather, and one of our experts can help you understand how this might pertain in your situation. Okay, so once you identify who the parents are, the next thing to do is fill out the information. And here's where it gets a little tricky. And again, I want to highlight a couple of things for you now. Number one, most students don't have some of this information about their parents. Really important, and I know this is going to sound pretty simple, but really important that you get their names right. Now, the reason I say that is it's their name legally. What is their legal name that's on their, for example, Social Security card? So I know in some cases with Hispanic families, it may be Hernandez de Garcia, but the question is, what is actually on the Social Security card? Is it Hernandez? Is it Garcia? Is it Hernandez de Garcia? What is the actual entry? And that's what you need to put on the form. It has to match the actual record. Same with date of birth, and most importantly, same with social security number. So a lot of students don't have their parents' social security number, but you're going to need that when it comes to this section of the form. So you want to make sure that your parents share that social security number with you. What the Department of Education is finding is that a lot of students will get to this point in the form and say, but I don't have my parent's social security number. So they'll click the box that says my parent doesn't have an SSN. That is not what that box means. Don't do that. Don't click that box. The only reason you would click that box is if your parents legitimately do not have a social security number. If they don't, click it and you'll be asked to enter an ITIN or an individual taxpayer ID number. If they don't have one of those, then you'll be asked to go through an identity check that uses a credit bureau report information to try to match identity. If you can't do that, there'll be a separate process for you. But again, all of that is only if you don't have an SSN and don't have a valid date of birth that matches. You also want to put in the parent's email address and confirm that email address. And once you click send invite, an invitation will be sent to your parent to start their section of the FAFSA form. Remember, I said there are two sections. So we're doing the student section. We're going to look a little later at the parent section, but each one of those is a separate section. Also on this form, you'll see it suggests to you that you only complete the parent who will fill out this form box. So Raya has two parents, as we said, but only one of them has completed this form. Why is that? Well, generally, if your parents are married and file their taxes together, only one of them is going to have to complete the form. The only time both parents need to complete the form is if they have two different tax records. So if mom and dad are married, but mom and dad file separately from each other, or mom files a tax return and dad does not, or neither parent files a tax return, then you will need to have two different records, two different contributors. Otherwise, if mom and dad both file the form together, only one parent needs to complete as a contributor. The reason that's important is because you're trying to match against the IRS to see what records are at the IRS and match those records. If they can match one record, they can pull the whole tax information. They don't need to have both parents complete the form. So that is important. Again, keep in mind that this is using the IRS system, and we'll look at the actual process as we go further. Okay. So we're now done with student demographics. We're going to move into, sorry, we're going to move into a little more demographic information. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is just information about gender, which you can choose not to answer. It's not really, doesn't do anything for financial aid eligibility, just some generic information for tracking purposes. The same on race. So again, these are optional. There's no hardship if you don't answer them. This next question is a little different. So the question about U.S. citizenship status is really important. To receive federal financial aid, you must be either a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. So what is considered an eligible non-citizen? Well, there are lots of categories, but generally, this is people who have a permanent resident card, like a green card, or are considered a resident alien or a permanent resident, right? Or it might be people who are here on refugee status or asylee status, or it might be here under different processes. If you're unclear, if you are an eligible non-citizen, you want to take a look online. You could Google FAFSA, eligible non-citizen, and you can find information about who qualifies as an eligible non-citizen under the FAFSA. A reminder that only the student needs to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen, not their parents. So in an example where maybe parents were visiting the US and a student was born in the US while they were visiting, the student might be a citizen, but their parents might not be. And in that situation, the student is still eligible for federal aid. The parents would still fill out the FAFSA and provide their information. They don't have to be US citizens for the student to receive federal financial aid. The next question asks about education status and how much of college, if at all, student's parents completed. The reason this question is asked is really for tracking purposes and to help identify first generation students. There's no impact on federal financial aid, but some state programs and some institutional programs may provide additional support, either financially or other ways, to students who are considered first generation. So that is why this question is asked. The next question asks if the student's parent, was killed in the line of duty. And there are two thoughts here. One is if the parent was killed while serving as a member of the armed forces or while performing official duties as a public safety officer. If the answer is yes, then there's certain benefits that are provided to the student by virtue of a Pell Grant, but documentation would have to be provided to the college or university. But in most cases, I would imagine the answer here would be no. And as we close out the demographics section, there's some information here about what is the student's high school completion status. To receive federal financial aid, you have to have a high school diploma or equivalent. So that might include a GED or being homeschooled, but the student answers that information and then provides information on what high school they attended by searching the state and the name of the school and matching against that high school. The reason matching against the high school is important is because high schools get results about what percentage of their students have completed the FAFSA. So it's good to confirm the high school the student attended. So now we get to the financial section. And in years past, this was very complicated. You had to type in your tax information, you had to pull out your tax return, you might have to link to the IRS, but all of that is made much easier by virtue of the new FAFSA. In fact, many families have been confused at how easy this is. And you'll see there are really only three questions that are going to be asked about your tax information and then some information about your assets. But it's pretty easy. So you click continue, and here we go. So your tax information is automatically transferred over from the IRS, and there are really only three questions that are asked. Number one, and remember we're talking about the student here, did the student roll over a pension? Well, most students don't have pensions, and most students don't have a rollover. But this is a question that's going to be asked of parents as well, so I'll go into it now. What may happen is in a tax year, a parent may have a pension, a 401k or retirement plan, that they're moving from one plan to another plan. In that situation, that income would show up on their tax return. So this is a way to note that money was received, but it was immediately redeposited into another retirement plan. But in most cases, your answer to that question, both parents and students, is going to be zero. The next question, your amounts of college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefits. This is only in the case that you actually have reported some of that scholarship as income to the IRS. It is very unlikely that you have this situation, especially if you're a new student. But in some situations, students have so much grant money or scholarship money that they have to pay taxes on a part of it, and it's included as part of their income for the year. If that was true in 2022, which is the year we're looking at, then you would put the amount of that scholarship that you pay taxes on in this second line. For most parents and most students, that's going to be zero, but the number is there in case that's true of you. The third category here is what's called foreign earned income exclusion. This is for families who have income that they earn abroad. So let's say you're a US resident filing a US tax return, but a parent lives in London and does work in London. And as a result, you file a British tax return. I'm making this up. Um, and you don't want to pay that tax twice. You don't want to pay the abroad tax as well as the US tax. So there's a system to allow you to deduct that foreign earned income from your US taxes. Well, here's where you'd report the amount because it does have to be added back for our purpose. It is a income source. So here's where you would put the amount of that income so it can in fact be attended or attributed to here. So that is how that information is provided. But again, for most students, that's going to be zero, and probably for most parents, that's going to be zero as well. Next page, the student is asked to provide information about their assets. And again, this is generally going to be very small for most families or most students, but it's asking for cash, savings, and checking accounts. It's asking for businesses or farms the student owns. Again, chances are students not owning a farm or a business. Or if they own a business that has very little assets, it might be a computer and that's it. And then the third one here asks for other investments like stocks or bonds or real estate or any of those sorts of pieces. A couple of points, and again, these are the same questions you'll see for parents, so I want to highlight these here. Notice it never asks about home. So the home you live in is not considered an asset for the purposes of the FAFSA, and neither are your retirement accounts. So if you're saving money in retirement, an especially designated retirement account like a 401k or a 403b plan, you are not going to put that information on this form because it doesn't ask for that. So, for example, I have money saved in my retirement account that's in the stock market. I would not put that here. But if separately I decided, I'm going to buy some Disney stock, then I would put the value of that Disney stock as an investment if I'm using something other than my retirement fund to pay for that. But likely for many families, that's going to be zero. The next section, the student actually selects the colleges they want to apply to. And much like the high school, this is just a search by state and by name. Or if you have the school code, and every college in the country has a 6-digit school code, you can search by school code as well. And the student can add up to 20 colleges on the FAFSA form and can actually use the system to apply to up to 20 individual schools. You do not have to be accepted by the school to submit a FAFSA. You don't even have to have applied for admission to the school yet to do a FAFSA. You want to go ahead and list the schools just in case. This does mean they will get your information, but it doesn't mean you have to apply to them for admission or have been accepted. You want to make sure the FAFSA is completed so they can get that information and have your record. Finally, there's a review page, and we're almost done with the students section. And you'll notice the parents section goes really quickly because we've talked about most of these screens already. But the student has a chance to review, and really important, if you close this out, you've not done your section because you have to go on and sign the form. The last piece, really important piece, is sign the application. If you do not sign the application, it is rejected. So you have to finish all the way through. Click I agree, I'm signing it, click the sign button, and that then finishes the student section of the application. The next piece of information will be the parent section of the application, which we're going to look at in just a moment. So the dependent student will then they'll receive an email saying your first piece of information is done. We're waiting for your parents, and we will move on. So Raya's mother, Alcina in this case, got this email when Raya confirmed her information earlier in the application. This email was delivered to Raya's mom, and Raya's mom was told, hey, your daughter Raya is applying for FAFSA. We need your information as a contributor. Please click the Get Started button to start your application. So if she clicks the Get Started button, that will take her to studentaid.gov, and that will get her started on her section of the application. And you're going to see a lot of this looks very, very similar to what we just went through. So let's go through it fairly quickly. And we probably have about 15 minutes left, and then we'll take questions if there are any questions you have that haven't already been answered. So once Raya's parent logs in and accepts the invitation and confirms that she understands that, you're going to see just some basic information about what it means to complete the FAFSA and be a contributor. And then you'll see those same 4 videos that we talked about before. There they are again. The same page to confirm your identity. The same page about consent. Make sure you understand you're providing consent and click approve. The same page about parent demographics. The same page about marital status. So now we're talking about a parent's marital status. Notice, by the way, the parent section is only 3 sections. There's not 5. It's much shorter. It's just 3 pieces. Parent state of legal residence. We talked about this before. Again, reminder, it's which parent moved to the state first. And now we move into parent finances. First question asks, do you receive federal benefits? So those benefits are things like earned income tax credit, housing assistance, free or reduced lunch, Medicare, SNAP, CHIP, SSI, etc. Why is it asking this question? Well, in some situations, families who answer one of these as yes may be able to skip their asset information entirely and not count any of their assets. So it's asking to determine if any of those are true. If any of those are true, you click the box that's appropriate and click continue or boxes. In Raya's case, the answer is none. The next question asks, did or will the parent file the 2022 IRS Form 1040 or 1040 NR? Raya's mom has answered yes. And did the parent file the 2022 joint tax return with their current spouse? Raya's mom has answered again yes. So that means Raya's mom can use the match with the IRS and bring that information over automatically. But let's talk about what happens if some of these answers are no. So if the answer to the first question is no, we did not file a 2022 IRS Form 1040. The next question will ask if you filed a foreign form or like in a foreign government or a Puerto Rico tax return? And if the answer to that is yes, then the information will tell you to enter your income by hand. If the answer to that is no, then it will go through and try to match to make sure you did not file the tax return. So let's say the answer to the first question is yes, but the answer to the second one is no. Let me give you an example. Let's say, God forbid, Alcina's husband died after 2022. So in 2022, Raya's parents were both alive. They filed a tax return together. But in August of 23, Raya's father passed away. If the answer is no, then Alcia's mom will be told, okay, you need to now fill out just the information that pertains to you, not to your widowed spouse. Or let's say another example. Let's say Raya's parents got divorced after 2022, and now Raya's mom is by herself, or maybe she's married to someone else. So really important that is the reason for that question, because obviously then there's a mismatch between what is on the IRS form and what their current reality is. For most parents, it's going to be a yes, but if your situation has changed, this allows you to do a hand entry for whatever information might have changed. The next question asks about family size. So generally, the FAFSA is going to assume that the number of dependents you list, or number of exemptions you list on your IRS form, is the number of people in your household. But that may or may not be true. So let me give you an example. Let's say my wife and I, we have 2 kids. There are 4 of us, but my wife's parents are elderly and they moved in with us. So on my IRS form, it says 4. It says me, my wife, our kids. But because her parents have moved in and we're supporting more than half of their expenses, there are actually 6 of us in the family. In that situation, you have the ability to override if you need to. And if you say yes, it'll ask it'll ask how many dependents do you have that live with you and will receive more than half of their support from the parent. So in this situation, I would have answered 3 because it would have been the student's sibling and the 2 parents that I'm counting. So you have an option to override that if that is the case. The next question asks about the number in college. This is really just informational because nothing's going to be done with this information, but it is helpful for colleges to understand if there are others in your family who are attending college as well. And finally, now we're to the financial information. We talked about most of these questions before: the pension rollover, the college grant scholarships or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income, and the foreign income earned exclusion. There's one additional one here that says, did the parent receive the earned income credit? Again, the earned income credit is just a benefit that accrues to low-income families that helps provide a refund on their taxes paid, or if there are no taxes paid. So if you do receive it, you want to mark that as yes. But again, many families, the answer there is going to be no. Here's the asset section. Again, looks a lot like the last asset section. The main difference is this first question. I just want to highlight this one for you. So this asks, did the parent receive annual child support in the last calendar year that's completed? So if you are divorced as a parent and you're filling out the form and you receive child support from the other parent, you would report the amount of child support you received in the last complete calendar year. Because we're in 2024, that last complete calendar year would be 2023, and that will be where you report that information. It then says, can you tell me information about the other parent? Remember, we skipped this earlier. In this case, because they are married filing jointly, we don't really need information from that other parent, but it asks who the other parent is to confirm that information just so we have it for the record. And now we're going to review and sign the form. So Raya's mom is reviewing, acknowledging, and signing the form. She gets a confirmation that says, congratulations, you're done with your section. And that's it. So what happens next is that Raya would actually get an email that says, we've received your application. And that email is what you're going to need to be able to receive your $20 Amazon gift card. And I'm going to walk through how you do that in a moment. I'm showing you, by the way, this is again the 312 page PowerPoint that I'm going to link you to if you want to go back and look at this after tonight. If you're an independent student or you have other situations you want to look through, all of this information is here. But I want to show you that once you receive your note, once you actually complete the FAFSA, and both parent and student have done their section, you're going to receive what's called a FAFSA submission summary. That FAFSA submission summary allows you to log back in and see exactly what has been submitted and confirms that your information has been processed. It also gives you something called a data release number. That data release number is important in case you want to give that to a school. Let's say you forgot to list a school on the application and they want to download your application. You can give them this number so they can download your application, or you can list them, you can add them to the FAFSA as well. So you'll see when you log in, it gives you information about what aid you might be eligible for. It also tells you your student aid index, which is an important number because that is used to determine how much financial aid you qualify for. It also repeats all the questions that you've answered and gives you the answers to those questions. And finally, it will help you compare information about the schools you've applied to, such as their graduation rate, their debt upon completion, their retention rate, etc. And it tells you next steps. What do you have to do next? So with that, what I want to do next is I want to show you then how do you complete your section? How do you do your part to get your funding, your $20 gift card? And I want to tell you, if you're so motivated, how you can participate and actually receive up to $500 for every 10 families you can help fill out the FAFSA. So let's take a look and log in and get to the form so you can see what that looks like for your completion. So hold on, let's see. Thought I had this listed, but let's see if I can find it quickly. Let's see. Do you have the if one of you, Tron, can type into the chat the FAFSA submission form? In the meantime, I will show the FAFSA advising page, so we get some information there for folks and the family FAFSA page. I thought I had the Google Doc up, but I appear not to. So here is the family FAFSA page. This is the page. If you go to www.familyfafsa.com, this is the page where you registered for tonight's event, or you might have done it through Facebook. At the bottom of this page, this link will take you to a page that has the entire PowerPoint presentation that we've done this evening. So you can see it right here. Here is the link. If you want to go back and look, there are the 312 pages that you could certainly come and take a look at if you would like to. In terms of your submission form, and thank you, Colleen, for typing that in, this is what you're going to complete to, and we can link this for you. We'll also send it to you via an email confirmation after tonight. And actually, Colleen gave it to all of you. This is the form to submit your proof of submission. You'll type in your name, address, and email, your phone number, your race, ethnicity, if you're willing, what high school you attend or attended, and it tells you how to submit what you're going to submit, what the email is going to look like. And I'll show you a picture of that in a second. You click Add File. You can upload a copy of the piece that you have submitted. And once you do that, you will then actually be able to receive the $20 Amazon gift card, which we will send to you. So again, you'll have a chance to take a look at that. If you have 10 friends that you can convince to do a FAFSA who have not yet done one, for every 10 friends that you can get to complete a FAFSA, you can earn up to $500. And again, this is through our program for FAFSA advising. So, as a college student yourself, if you have friends who are either going back to school or going to school or haven't yet gone to school or are thinking about going to school, and you can convince 10 people to complete a FAFSA and collect that information, you can submit proof of those 10 and receive $500 in a stipend. And we'll send you information on how to do that as well. There's a link for that. And if you have friends who would like to be so inclined, we're doing workshops on July 9th and July 20th. This page is at FAFSAadvising.com. The page I first shared with you is familyfafsa.com. So feel free, if you have desire to help others and encourage others to attend college, we are willing to help support you by virtue of your work in that space. So with that, we have reached the end of my comments. I'm happy to take questions and see if there are other pieces that folks want to know. I do want to show you one more piece though before we get done. Let me just pull this up. Give me 1 second. I want to show you what that email from the Department of Education is going to look like. So just give me one moment where I can pull that up. So you can see exactly what it is that you will um, take, what we'll show. So here, for example, and let me share this, is what that will look like when it comes from the Department of Education. It will look like this. It will say, here's what's next. And you can see this is what I did. Daniel Markowitz, we received your FAFSA. Your submission date is, and your data release number, or your data release number is this. So very important. And I blanked out those 4 digits because I didn't want anyone to see my 4 digits. You can blank out those 4 digits, but important you leave that submission date where we can see it because we need to show that it was after we started our education campaign. You have until August 15th to submit documentation to receive your $20 or to receive your $500 if you're encouraging others to complete. Um, and we welcome you and hope that you'll be partnering with us to try and make sure that we can get students enrolled for the fall semester. So with that, Colleen, anything you would like to add, or Stefan or Tron, as we begin to come to a close?
No, fantastic, Daniel. We will upload the recording of this meeting on our YouTube channel, and we will send that plus the links to both forms, proof of evidence for your family's FAFSA completion, your support of 10 families FAFSA completion, as well as the link to the slides that Daniel went through tonight. That will go out to everyone tonight.
Great. Thank you. If you have any questions, we're going to stop the recording. If you have any questions, feel free